the human being in the context of eternal and contemporary threats to civilization. Our reflection about personalism, about person and posthumanism in Prague is accompanied by the philosophy of Jan Patočka, Radim Palouš, because his Patočka philosophy brings us to the fundamental question of philosophy. We must thinking about fundamental questions. In English, thinking and speaking about personality is very difficult because English it is not good language for personalistic reflection. It is very utilitarian, pragmatic language. And example, value often translate in English interest. No, value, only interest. It's problem thinking in English about person and individual. It's in Latin, German, in Polish. It is language reflection, personalistic reflection. In phenomenology, Scheller, personalist. Wojtyła, Ingarden, Tischner in Poland is thinking about persons. It's making language, philosophical language for personalistic reflection. In English, is not it is not spirits, personalistic spirits. It is a small problem with language. The idea of Imago Dei is silent background. The philosophy of science is terming categoria silent background. The idea of Imago Dei is the silent background of many concepts that develop the ideas of personalism, ideas of the human person. Because it is my argument, it is my teza. Next. It is motto for my lecture, motto with Polish ethics personalist, Professor Antoni Siemianowski. It is motto because Professor Siemianowski draws attention to the source of the enduring difficulties in defining the person. Difficulties in defining the person. This term, not defining. This does not mean decreeing a monadic self-closure, but is the beginning of analysis which make us aware to the manifold radicalism that accompanies reflection to the person and the individual. If a man is a person, then a person is reality. That not everything is possible. Not everything can be done with a man. It is my anti-reductionism argument. If a man is a person, then a person is reality, but not everything is possible. Not everything can be done with a man. Despite various handicaps, a person processes an unalienable personal dignity give to him, which is beyond the reach of forces that are in the fashion of some ideology combined with biotechnology, with transhumanism, to radically transform the way in which man exists, or even to completely destroy the humanity in him. Personal dignity versus power of ideology, versus power of biotechnology, versus power of transhumanism. Personal dignity is silent background of personal dignity is Imago Dei. If it is claimed that a man is not a person and thus not possess the ontic properties of a person, then anything is possible. It is limits. Dignity, it is limits. A person who is endowed this argument is with human dignity. And next, human dignity is versus creation of new men of ideology, of biotechnology, of transhumanism, and versus total control, social total control, politics, total control. Transhumanism, it is form of total control. Looking for a conscious and normative binding explanation of the value and meaning of being a person, a personalistic norm, can be formulated which state that a person categorically must not be treated as a mean that leads to achieving some goals. Heroic act, it is special axiological characteristic act. Only in heroic act of his own will can a person offer himself, making himself a gift to explanation, to exceptional value, and transcend himself. It is a very important category, transcend himself in personal thinking about man. Thinking about person have ancient origins in Boetius. Boetius have vision person of individual substance subsistentia, individual subsistentia with Latin, of regional nature. It is in European culture, it is first small definition of person. Small definition, it's not big, it is only small, it is inspired for thinking about person. In Boetius, thinking about person, difference in scope between the terms person and individual. Every person is an individual, but there are individuals that are not persons. It is a vision of a person, it is metaphysical perspective, where person is a being, not only spirit, not only body. Person is a being. In classical, with classical position was specific Wojciech Chudy say about person, rationality, freedom and reflection. It is free. Rationality, freedom and reflection are manifestation of the specificum of humanity, which is the value that constitutes a person, and this value is personal dignity. It is a very important argument for ontic state of person and his dignity. It is argumentation he develops Professor Chudy. Where is very important metaphysical ontic value and metaphysical ontic dignity. It is very important in this metaphysical vision of person. It's not necessary to affirm metaphysical inclination in personalistic vision, but metaphysical inclination is very good for argument to human dignity. Without indicating ontic grounds and without claiming the truth, is rather pragmatically motivated and not metaphysically deep way of thinking about the person seem to function in the practice of social life, in everyday discourse, and in many declarations of human rights, they call for the universal recognition that every person as a human being. It is problem of culture context, because with China point of view, it's not human rights, not human dignity, only collective. No individual, no person, only collective. Person is power. is chief. One chief is one person. It is in Latin, vip, very important person. It is reduction, thinking about man. However, the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, which are supposed to be universal in nature, remain in their definition of the major terms, as there is no consent to providing clarifying definitions. It is problematic. It is very problematic questions because it is fundamental philosophical questions. It is not one declaration, only actuality, fundamental questions. Who is man? Who is person? It's very interesting observers of Bartosz Brożek. The concept of a person resembles a primary concept in mathematical axiomatic system. About his logical problems, say to Bertrand Bolzano, prawda? About mathematic axiomatic system and status of primary concept in mathematical axiomatic system. And term of person is primary concept in system reflection about human life, about human ontic state. And next with Professor Brożek analyze with thinking about the term person and complicated with interpretation this term. Because it's short time. Do Archer przejdźmy. O, Margaret Archer, yes. Serious risk stem from the deficit of critical, philosophical understandings of the ontology of the person and the individual in the context of a supposedly supreme ontology of society, with the predominantes in the social science nowadays, risks are identified by Margaret Scottford Archer. It is very interesting reflection with sociology, with philosophy of social science. It is friend Paweł Danczak, Margaret Archer, and my friend. She say about sociological imperialists. Sociological imperialists had labored long and hard with a vacuum pump on human kind, sucking out the properties and powers of our species being to leave a void behind, to be filled with social forces. It is very important for thinking about posthumanism, because his fascination with the body has actually been the final chapter in the project of demolishing humanity. Transhumanism, it is this project. It is, say, sociologic, professor of sociology. From this perspective, Margaret Archer, Professor Margaret Archer, the science that are referent to a social should become profoundly humanistic and strive to recognize the properties and forces that characterize humanity in order that they not unintentionally fulfill the role of a vacuum pump that sucks out humanity and leaves a void to be filled.
Professor, 1 minute to summarize your conclusion.
Yes. It's a few months before the outbreak of World War, Stefan Wyszyński, who was quoted a personalistic intuition, writes the following words about the destruction of humanity, the annihilation of human agency in the political systems. This here very good reflection in this time of Wyszyński's, very prophetic reflection with consequence of sociology with totalitarian system. The social challenge that remains valid is the desire to defend men against positive sociologies which deificated society at the expense of the individual and against totalism which makes a new good out of the state. It is depersonalism value, and it is deconstruction human dignity. And next only is reflection of Popper about institutions do not act, only individual act, not act with institution, and Kotarbiński about personalistic idea in Stalinist era, with representation independent ethics. And final is thinking about personal in Wojtyła. It is a very short thing about personalistic idea of Alfred Wierzbicki. The personalistic norm with value of dignity. Final. About Imago Dei, he worked in silent background in this conception of person. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for my English, my Polish is my English. I think in Polish.
It's brave of you to have a presentation in a language that is like your own. So thank you for presenting. I would like to invite the next presenter in this session. It is Associate Professor Turčan, who will speak on a note of anarcho-transhumanism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the floor. I am by profession a legal scholar, but I have also finished my PhD in Lutheran theology, and I'm here basically rather as a theologian today as a lawyer, so to speak. I want to talk about the concept of anarcho-transhumanism, which I don't know if you are familiar with. This is a concept that can be found among the latest forms of anarchism and combines two aspects: the political ideas of anarchism with the transhumanist vision of the future man, or rather future transhuman. And anarcho-transhumanists even claim that anarchism is the only thinkable political model which is compatible with transhumanism. Aim of my paper is to comment on the concept from a theological perspective and to focus namely on the theological evaluation of two important values at play, which are essential to anarcho-transhumanism, which are human freedom and human perfection. According to a relatively well-known anarcho-transhumanist philosopher, William Gillis, transhumanism simply implies anarchism. His reasoning is quite simple in this regard and is based on the notion of risks implied by the technological advancement culminating in the very idea of transhumanism. He says, the more means by which people can act, the easier attack becomes, and the harder defense becomes. It's a simple matter of complexity. The attacker only needs to choose one line of attack. The defender needs to secure against all of them. This isn't just true of small thermal exhaust ports, it's true in our software ecosystems today and any other system with many dimensions of movement. Complexity, that is, more degrees of freedom within a system, allows for greater attack surface. Freedom, too, is disruptive and complex. It expands options, and when truly decentralized, spreads to individuals, it makes it impossible for power to function. For any actor, individual, or institution to control the vast, unfathomable diversity and complexity of the world. Impossible to impose edicts, even quote-unquote democratic ones. When liberal or social democrat transhumanists declare that what we need is technology under the control of the people, what is never included in that is how exactly that kind of control is supposed to work. We cannot control advanced technology without an authoritarianism so complete it would make Hitler and Stalin salivate in their graves. So what can we do? Gillis answers this question by pointing to the long-standing tradition of anarchism, which can, in his view, help us reach what we need, that is, an ethical awakening, a singularity of empathy that clarifies and refines our values, he says. Thus, according to Gillis, it is possible to have a world functioning without structural power relations, that is, to have a world of anarchy, where human or rather transhuman beings flourish on their way to their highest technologically imbued potential. However, as Pavel Malendowicz pointed out, in order for anarcho-transhumanism to count as a genuine form of anarchism, it is relevant what is the key value at play, whether it is human perfection or whether it is human freedom. Whether human freedom is just a means by which human perfection can be reached, or vice versa, whether human perfection is a means of reaching the true freedom. Because the appeal to freedom in general is a basic tenet of anarchism, for any approach to count as truly anarchists, we have to have human freedom as the final goal, not human perfection. If we agree with Gillis about the anarchistic implication of transhumanism, with which we may not, and many do not, like democratic transhumanists, they certainly do not agree. But if we agree with him, then from the anarchist perspective it is substantial to have human freedom as the goal, to which enhancement of our capabilities, our perfection, is only instrumental. So the question should not be, does transhumanism imply anarchism? Rather, does anarchism imply transhumanism? But be that as it may, let us suppose that transhumanism and anarchism go hand in hand. Or rather, that transhumanism implies either anarchy or tyranny. What can be said about the relationship or interaction of the two fundamental values at play, human perfection and human freedom, from the theological perspective, and what light does it shed on the concept of anarcho-transhumanism? We can say that it is quite clear that the Bible values both human perfection and human freedom. The notion of human perfection, including bodily perfection, is definitely there. Man was originally created perfect, very good, according to the Genesis narrative, and the creation began to go down only after the fall. Even the length of human life until the flood shows that originally the human condition was perfect. In the New Testament, the idea of human bodily perfection has eschatological charge. Apostle Paul speaks of the glorious bodies given to believers at Christ's parousia in 1 Corinthians 15. Humans are going to return to their original state of flourishing bodily and mental perfection in the era of life eternal. The value of freedom is also present there. It is illustrated by the story of the fall. In a certain sense, God values human freedom and lets people choose. Even the meta-narrative of Lucifer's fall, as traditionally seen in the parables of King of Tyre in Ezekiel 28 and the King of Babylon, Isaiah 14, presupposes the eminence of freedom. Freedom to choose, to love God, or to reject Him. However, it is true that in the normative texts of the Bible, like the law of Moses, and also in some biblical stories, human freedom is not seen as the absolute value in human relations. At least not in the sense of negative freedom, that is freedom from. Because people are required to do something for someone else in these texts and stories. But this would at its best exclude anarcho-capitalism, which is based purely on the idea of negative rights. However, most anarcho-transhumanists are not anarcho-capitalists. They are rather left-wing anarchists, which means they do not believe merely in the idea of negative freedom, but also in the idea of positive freedom, as has been seen in the Gillis's quotes. The notion of human perfection, culminating in the reality of transhumanism, is typically linked to the concept of positive freedom, that is freedom to, which, if valued highly, means we all ought to do something for each other in order to be truly free. So what is the biblical view of the relation or interaction of these two crucial values, human perfection and human freedom? Do they work together for good? And does anarcho-transhumanism appear as an acceptable view, theologically speaking? Of course, it may be asked whether transhumanism is really unavoidably linked to left-wing anarchism. Several years ago, Elizabeth Kolovu and Stavros Karageorgikas pointed out that according to a survey done in 2007, only 2% of the members of the World Transhumanist Association identified as left-wing anarchists. I don't know, maybe the data has changed meanwhile, who knows. Both of these authors are trying to separate the idea of transhumanism from anarchism. But for the purposes of my paper, let us suppose that it is impossible to have transhumanism without either left-wing anarchism or tyranny. Can theology give us some advice in the evaluation of these matters? There are several biblical passages that might be and usually are used as a theological argument against anarchism, like Paul speaking in Romans 13 or Peter in 1 Peter 2 about subjection to authorities, or Judges 21 speaking about everyone doing as he pleases because there is no king in Israel, etc. But there is, I think, one particular passage which is theologically speaking interesting and instructive with respect to the key values behind anarcho-transhumanism. It's because this passage seems to presuppose a non-negligible degree of human perfection and also a non-negligible degree of human freedom. I am speaking about the Genesis 6, which describes the state of humanity in the time before the flood. Just to set the context briefly, in Genesis 3 we encounter human fall. In Genesis 4 we have illustrations of the impact of expanding sin, culminating in the first murders. Genesis 5 records genealogy from Adam to Noah, and Genesis 6 speaks of human wickedness as the reason for God's punishment, namely the flood. There are, in my opinion, two key parts of Genesis 6 which are inspirational. The first is verses 1 to 8, and I will briefly read it. It's a well-known passage, but I will read it. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Neither their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground. For I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Okay, this text is famous for the mention of the mysterious Nephilim, traditionally translated as giants, the heroes of old, men of renown. Those who are children of the sons of God and the daughters of humans. Whether they are what they appear to be at first glance, that is half angelic, half humans, or whether they are merely human, as a tradition interprets them to be descendants of Sethites with Cainites, is not really decisive for our purposes. In any case, these are superhumans in some sense, either metaphysically or at least as to their particular physical and perhaps also mental capacities. We could thus say that they are some sort of enhanced human beings, at least compared to what we have today, or compared to other ordinary men of their time. And yet, these guys seem to use their capabilities for evil rather than for good. It is true that the text does not evaluate them in the moral sense. It only says they were heroes of might, which is basically a neutral designation denoting their strength and success, but the mere fact that only Noah and his family are finally saved when the flood comes implies that these Nephilim are not good guys. Liberated, capable individuals, and yet not good ones. In the verse 3 we have the expression of God's Spirit contending with human hearts. There is a theological debate on the meaning of this, which also has some anarcho-transhumanist implications, but for the brevity of time I will skip this portion. We could say that Genesis 6 verses 1 to 8 shows human wickedness together with human might, which is fully revealed during the hundreds of years life span let alone for potentially longer, as some transhumanists desire. This is the reason for God's judgment, their wickedness together with their might. After the flood, human age decreases rapidly according to the stories, subsequent stories. And the very text says their days will be 120 years, which might be either interpreted as the length of human life or the period of grace during which Noah builds his ark. This story, in any case, shows us that people in superhuman conditions, either those extraordinary Nephilim or even other ordinary men, who were able to live for a very long time with well-functioning bodies and minds, are prone, or at least capable, to aggregate evil drastically. This is, I think, at the minimum, narratively speaking, a raised finger against the human pursuit of superhuman perfection in the fallen state, let alone when people are more or less, rather more than less, unrestrained from using their superhuman capacities as they please. I say unrestrained because it seems to me that the original civilization resembles anarchy in some sense. Saying this, I move to the second important part of Genesis 6, which is constituted by verses 5, 11, and 13, which implicitly contain the second important value, that is human freedom. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of human heart was only evil all the time. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all the people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. If the earth is filled with violence because everyone is corrupt, because every inclination of human thought is only evil, this seems much like the Hobbesian bellum omnium contra omnes, where homo homini lupus est. I do not deny that some systemic power structures might be presupposed in the story. But the mention of widespread violence gives the impression of much freedom of individuals in dealing with their neighbors. It seems like there is no centralized power to restrain them, just like Lamech in Genesis 4, whose story seems to sketch out human relations of those times, literally taken. The famous 19th century biblical scholar Albert Barnes once noticed, it is remarkable that we have no hint of any kind of government in the antediluvian world. It is open to us to suppose that the patriarchal polity would make its appearance, as it is an order based upon natural relations. But it is possible that God himself, being still present and manifest, was recognized as the governor. To him offerings were brought, and he deals with Cain on his first and second transgression. In that case, the lawless violence of the strong and willful is to be regarded as rebellion not only against the patriarchal rule, but also the divine supremacy. It seems to me, just like to Barnes, that there is rather a lack of power that could hold back the widespread aggression in Genesis 6. By the way, the first mention of a human ruler or a king appears in Genesis 10, 4 chapters later, that is after the flood, where kingdom of Nimrod is mentioned. Before that, no kings or rulers are mentioned. This is, of course, an argument from the silence. However, a hypothetical Christian anarcho-transhumanists need an optimistic anthropology, which does not seem present in our story either. This optimism is typically linked to the idea of education, this Socratic idea that well-informed individuals are able to live in harmony with other well-informed individuals. But there is, I think, a presupposition of well-informed individuals in our story of Genesis 6 also. In Genesis 4, God and Cain talk together, which perhaps suggests that God is still acting in some empirically perceivable way in the times after the fall until the flood, even though people have been removed from the paradise. There is also this implicit idea of the Garden of Eden being still present on earth until the flood, even though nobody can come in. This means people do, or at least can have, information about God in this story. Methuselah is the former contemporary of Adam, and he dies in the very year of the flood. Thus he is able to testify almost until the very end of the first civilization. And God himself is trying to plead with human hearts, as it said in the verse 3. So it is not impossible for humans to react to God, at least unless one endorses the Calvinistic paradigm, which I do not. If only people are willing, but they are not. Thus, this story reminds us that we cannot rely on human reasonableness, on the good choices of well-informed individuals, and because of this, the idea of anarchic society, or at least as the left-wing anarchists imagine it, seems just illusory to me. Conclusion: it is not necessary to prove that politically liberated and technologically improved people will fill the earth with violence or lawlessness, like we see it in the story of Genesis 6. The mere threat is, I think, enough for a critical approach to the idea of anarcho-transhumanism. It is good to note that the first chapters of the book of Genesis are paradigmatic for the whole Bible in some sense. Thus, they have an important theological bearing on the formation of the whole thought, of the whole theology, including anthropology and social ethics. If it is true that transhumanism implies either dystopia or anarchy, as Gillis has put it, then there is, I think, a theological warning in our story against a risky pursuit of human enhancement. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor. And the last presenter in this session will be Dr. Jozef Jenčík. He will speak on transhumanism, power, and anarchy. So it is a similar topic, but perhaps with some new views. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for your introduction. The intersection of transhumanism, power, and anarchy indeed presents a captivating field of study, exploring the transformative potential of emerging technologies and the socio-political implications they carry. In this presentation, we delve into the intricate relationship between transhumanism, power, and anarchy, with a particular emphasis on collective empowerment, the restructuring of societal norms. Drawing inspiration from ancient wisdom, we turn to the book of Job, where we encounter profound reflections on the limitations of human comprehension and the awe-inspiring power of the divine. Indeed, these are the mere edges of his ways, and how small a whisper we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? These words encapsulate the humbling recognition that our understanding of the world is limited, mere fragments in the vast tapestry of existence. The thunderous power that reverberates through the cosmos is a force beyond our comprehension, reminding us of the boundless mysteries that surround us. Within the context of our exploration, we juxtapose the cautious reservation often expressed regarding transhumanism with a resolute affirmation of the potential for technological progress to empower individuals and foster collective liberation. It is recognition that the limitations of the human mode of being are so pervasive and familiar that we often fail to notice them, and to question them requires manifesting an almost childlike naivete, like my predecessor duly noted. This parallels the biblical notions that to enter the kingdom of heaven, one must be like a child, unburdened by preconceived notions and open to the wonders that lie beyond our current understanding. In addition, we can note that totalitarian states breed powerlessness, suffocating individual freedoms, suppressing dissent, and perpetuating inequalities. But it is within the realm of transhumanism that we discover the tools to transcend these constraints, enabling individuals to push the boundaries of their own existence and realize their full potential. By augmenting physical capabilities, transhumanism acts as a catalyst for personal empowerment, rendering totalitarian obsolete and giving rise to a society where power is distributed among its citizens. So, to fulfill these ends, we will navigate this discourse by the rejections of idealistic notions of liberty and by embracing of pragmatic understanding of liberty. Liberty is not merely the absence of obstacles, like I was firstly formulated by realist tradition in political philosophy, namely Thomas Hobbes, but active manifestation of individual and collective agency. This is how liberty coincides with power, as liberty without power is absolute. It is the realization that no single voice should drown out the chorus of diverse perspectives, embracing the transformative potential of technological advancements, including transhumanism. We seek to dismantle traditional barriers, expand the horizon of human potential, and foster a society where collective rights are prioritized. All other notions of liberty are, at least from the point of this realistic tradition in political philosophy, such as the liberty as the awareness of necessity, or liberty as acting in accordance with the law, are merely ideological phrases, merely metaphors, and does not ground it in any scientific or critical explanation. In this journey of exploration, the concept of sovereignty emerges as a critical focal point. Once a symbol of power and control, sovereignty now reveals its limitations and reinforces existing inequities. It is necessary to realize that modern technologies come to settle the conflict between what the will might and what it wants. From this discrepancy within the will itself, which in our Western political tradition began with St. Augustine, it is actually possible to understand the model contradiction between the individual and society in a more fundamental way. The sovereign will, originally driven by the maximalization of wanting, as the technology did not provide the means for maximization of might in the past, has historically culminated in the concept of the sovereignty of the people. The sovereignty of the people is thus not an ideal, but a reminder of the limited power of the individual. A free individual was actually forced by external circumstances to enter into a social contract through which he would see himself as a member of social body, which allegedly concentrates the minds of all, as we can find in the works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. At the same time, however, technologies come for the aid to sovereignty by maximizing the power of the will, which, however, is difficult for the introspective sovereignty of the will to notice. Human rights would objectively no longer need to be in conflict with public interest in the technological era. Technologies are able to settle this dialectical contradiction by simply declaring it superfluous. However, for the first time in history, we are facing the opposing threat as formulated by Saul and Augustine. It is the threat that actually the will might, but no longer wants, which is actually the logical completion of the sovereignty of wanting par excellence and not recognizing the help of technologies. It is for this reason why Spengler, for example, imploringly fought against what he called provincial thinking. He recommended devoting himself to the improvement of technology. Spengler's Declaration of the West is therefore in fact happy tidings against the dystopian fate, which in other words merely covers the nothingness of what is happening in the technological epoch. So by reimagining sovereignty through a lens that embraces collective rights and inclusivity, we strive for a society where power is shared and decisions are made through collective consensus. It is through the harmonious integration of individual freedoms and shared responsibilities that we lay the foundation for a more egalitarian and just society. By embracing the transformative potential of transhumanism and technological progress, we challenge the oppressive shackles of totalitarianism and powerlessness. We recognize that collective empowerment and augmentation of physical capabilities in line with the realist tradition lead to a society where individual agency flourish and coercive force of majoritarian democracy is replaced by consensus-driven decision-making. In considering the relationship between democracy and power, it is essential to read the insights of philosopher John Dewey, who emphasized the dynamic and adaptive nature of democracy. For example, in his work The Public and Its Problems, he states that the task of democracy is forever that of a creation of freer and more human experience in which all share and to which all contribute. Dewey contended that democracy is thus not limited to a particular form of government, but is a way of life that can be embodied in various social arrangements. Building upon this perspective, we can argue that the democracy can coexist with both archy and anarchy. Democracy, as its core, is a system that upholds the principle of inclusivity, participation, and collective decision-making. It is not confined to a specific power structure or governing framework. Instead, democracy can thrive within different contexts, including those with hierarchical elements, archy, or those characterized by the absence of central authority, anarchy. Acknowledging this versatility allows us to recognize that democracy is not solely reliant on a particular system or institution, but is rooted in the active engagement and empowerment of individuals. It is the spirit of democracy that matters most, the commitment to fostering open dialogue, respecting individual rights, and promoting the common good. However, it is essential to remain vigilant, as history has shown that even democratic systems can exhibit totalitarian tendencies. The concentration of power, erosion of civil liberties, and manipulation of democratic processes can undermine the very essence of democracy. By acknowledging this risk, we can strive to create democratic systems that are resilient, transparent, and accountable. As can be seen in the slide, we spent between the two different scenarios. First scenario is the scenario of possibility, of power, of empowerment, where the old concepts of our European traditions, namely concepts of individual human rights and liberties, division of power, and free market economy, will transform to collective human rights and liberties, distribution of power, and shared economy, and between the necessity scenario, powerlessness, when these concepts will transform themselves from individual human rights and liberties to duties, the division of power to concentration of power, and the free market to the state-regulated economy. This second scenario is very dangerous to our European tradition of liberty, human rights, and free market economy. Furthermore, it is most important to acknowledge that during times of crisis, nascent participatory frameworks can be vulnerable to the abuse of power by centralized authority. This has become especially evident in recent times, such as during the global COVID-19 pandemic. In the face of crisis, governments and institutions often take swift actions and make critical decisions that impact the lives of individuals and communities. While some of these measures may be necessary for public health and safety, it is crucial to make a vigilant eye on the potential for the abuse of power. In some instances, the urgency of the situation can lead to the centralization of decision-making and the suppression of participatory processes. Emergency powers may be invoked, bypassing democratic checks and balances in the names of expediency. While these measures may be deemed necessary in the short term, they can have long-lasting implications for democratic values and citizens' empowerment. This underscores the importance of our commitment to active citizenship and the continuous evaluation of democratic processes even in time of crisis. It reminds us that democracy is not a static state, but an ongoing process that requires collective engagement and safeguarding against the encroachment of power. So this is how these two scenarios intertwine between each other, and both of them are surely in a logical way possible. Let me conclude with a rather terrifying question. It is a default question about artificial intelligence that has largely been. The question is, how can we most effectively control or enslave it? As anarchists, our position is obvious. If we are to develop such minds, they deserve compassion and liberty. All too often, those in artificial intelligence-focused communities that have spun off from transhumanism circle abandon the ethical dimension of their research. This paradigm is profoundly un-transhumanist because it privileges some kind of static humanity with static values and desires, and then enslaves non-human minds to serve those ends. The entire point of transhumanism is to embrace the fluidity and transitory nature of the human, not to cling to humanness in its current form. In the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, man is something that shall be overcome. What have you done to overcome it? So let us dare to overcome the limitation of present selves and embark on a path of collective empowerment where the convergence of technology and human potential paves the way for a world that honors the beauty and diversity of humanity. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, let me again thank all three presenters in this session. We will divide our discussion. Maybe we'll see how it goes. We have about 20 minutes to discuss the three presentations before we have to depart for lunch. If we see that the discussion is not complete and we need to go back to it, I believe we can do it after lunch, depending on how fast we eat and how fast we walk. to lunch. So let me let's see this so I can see better. So the floor is open to questions, comments now. 2 or 3 presenters, please. I'm sure you agree, we heard fascinating presentations, mind-provoking, definitely, in many respects. So, if I may, okay, please, Professor Paul.
Maybe to the last one, so the previous one was critical of, more critical of anarcho-transhumanism. Your version was more positive, if I understood that correctly. So my question would be, and I found it interesting how you understood democracy, but the question would be, what kind of personal attitude, virtues are necessary in some way to have this kind of empowerment with the help of technology? So I'm reminded a little bit again about Mahatma Gandhi, who also tried to understand democracy in an anarchic way. So he said, I'm in favor of an anarchism of a special kind. So it's not the anarchism that everything is possible and we do everything, but it was an anarchism of people who are able to rule themselves, have self-constraint. Is that something is also part of your reflection? I mean, Dewey, I think, has also this insight that there is a certain virtue, a certain type of persons necessary.
I don't think that there are certain virtues necessary, but it's the assumption that individuals with increased physical agency are more likely to seek out others with similar interest and aspiration, thus build some cooperation in the framework of the anarchy. This is derived from a combination of sociological and psychological factors. Like, for example, you can mention self-determination theory, social identity theory, homophilia, and common goals and interests is like the main points which contribute to the point that these individuals who, with increased physical agency, which is the prerequisite of any realistic notion of freedom or liberty, they are more likely to seek out others with similar interest and aspiration. For example, that this mentioned self-determination theory poses that individuals have innate psychological need for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So that individuals have increased physical agency, they have a greater sense of autonomy and control over their lives, which can lead to stronger motivation to seek outright money individuals for connection and for shared values and interests. It is not the question, the autonomy of the person goes in a different and in a bad way. Like when you don't have this power, you feel powerlessness, and you engage in a criminal behavior, So it is not much about the value of informatics, it's much more about the motivation and psychological, sociological factors.
I think this is at its best an argument for decentralization, not for getting rid of the state, in my view. There's still a giant leap between decentralization and statelessness.
So, but the state is conceived in our tradition as a combination of power. And by this view, I think there cannot be a combination of power because everyone is empowered in some sense that has a veto on the democratic process.
I understand it, but it requires an optimistic anthropology.
I don't think it's about the inclination of psychological factors and sociological factors which contribute to aforementioned scenario.
Yes. So I'm also inclined to think that it does require some optimism. I don't think it has been tried on a larger scale. Perhaps in small groups, isolated. I can envision how this kind of shared, interest can work in a small group setting that is relatively homogeneous culturally, for example. Right. But since we live in such a diverse world with such very diverse cultures, religions, interests, lack of resources, and so on, how do you imagine this to be instituted, such a new system globally? Because this wouldn't survive if you instituted it on small local levels, because other actors, state actors, would use this opportunity to overtake such a group of people who would not be able to defend themselves, geopolitically speaking. So how do you propose this on a larger scale, geopolitically, globally?
I think there are some traces already in this sense of transformation society. We have, for example, Uber, which is
that's shared economy. Yeah.
For me, it is a nice example of how the technology contributes to bypass the central authority of state by imagining new modes of economy which are not governed by the state, and the state is powerless paradoxically to confront them. They cannot just annihilate these forms because it would go to mass protest or something. So there are traces like these models of shared economy. Or we can see it for me in the COVID pandemic when there was basically all measures which state rendered was in the context of the soft law. And they need in this type of crisis active participation of the citizens, which are done voluntarily in a large scale. So this is the way that in the face of crisis like COVID pandemic, but also environmental crisis, etc., which contribute to these sentiments of collective empowerment, and this sentiment can be by the state central authority abused, which would lead to dystopian versions of things, or it would lead to a more optimistic scenario where these are not misused but enhanced and would contribute to a reimagining of legal frameworks which would be compatible from, like for example, from the shift from individual rights and collective rights and which we see nowadays also in many scenarios where we give emphasis on the human rights movement, on animal rights movements, and related fields.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for Martin also, because you showed us with a biblical text, or you interpreted the biblical text as a warning of certain kind of enhancement.
I think we can read it back in our contemporary context, of course.
My question is, it's interesting. I have a book at home, and there's also some other material. So in Silicon Valley, part of the Google universe and connected to Ray Kurzweil, there is this Singularity University. And I know a researcher there who did a book on longevity, so lengthen the lifespan and so on. And she has a lot of biblical quotations in her book. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the Bible, you cannot say that we should not try to, for instance, even to overcome death in some way. You know, you have those many passages, who dies with 100 has not really achieved full life and so on. So, on the one hand, I mean, you have passages where you have a certain warning of going beyond limits, and on the other side, you have a lot of passages that move forward people who are going towards transhumanism. So in some way, I mean, maybe that's connected to what Winnie Löffler said in the morning. In the Bible itself, there is partly a strong dynamism in it to move forward. So my question would be, how do we decide which? So does the Bible say it's forbidden to do that, or does the Bible say we should try with all our means as co-creators to prolong life, to seek longevity, to try to postpone this as possible?
I think we can, but the extreme versions like consciousness in a machine, if that is possible, it doesn't seem possible, but if that is possible, I think I would hesitate because that might resemble, theologically speaking, a human effort to be independent of God. We just live forever because we can do it technologically.
Yeah.
So I think there could be this undetachable aspect of becoming like God. But after all, of course, God is in control of everything, so we can try. We will see how far He will let us go. We can try, but it's a matter of motivation. And my warning was rather against this result, either dystopia or anarchy, which doesn't seem any good to me.
Okay,
just a footnote also to Professor Turčan. On your interpretation of the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4. I mean, as a student, I always wondered about this verse, and my impression was, and I just checked it back this seems to be a remainder of some other textual tradition, and you can snipper it out from the text of Genesis 6 and nothing would happen. So somehow this Genesis 6:4 is somehow also disturbing the main narrative drive of the whole chapter. So I tend to be reluctant with theological interpretations on that. So if you connect Genesis 6:4 then with God's intention to eradicate the people, so I think it's exegetically a bit risky. Or do you find any backings in biblical scholarship?
Yeah, there are various outlooks on this. Some view them as Gilgamesh or other rulers, so they say there was no anarchy before that. There were some rulers. This is an allusion to. There are various views. Some say that heroes of might are one category. These are offspring of the daughters of men and sons of God, and Nephilim are the other group. But when at least applying something like a canonical approach, you just have this story as we have it, and you cannot escape the conclusion that these are not good guys because the story doesn't include them into the category of the righteous ones. Only Noah and his family found grace. So, okay, if you reject a kind of canonical approach, like we have the story as we have it, and we have to do something with it, okay, then we can be skeptical and we can exclude that, and we can complicate that. I'm definitely agreeing with that. But if I take the canonical approach, I think the moral of the story is there.
So you take it from a synchronic approach and say, okay, the text is as it is, and
yes.
Okay.
That's what we have. That's how we have it. From this perspective.
So the tonality.
The writing is on the wall.
The tonality is so interestingly changing from 6:3 to 4 and back to 5. So these videos and drawings, it's a very positive, almost decorative tonality. It goes back. It's really, it's amazing.
But whoever was there, even if we exclude the Nephilim, from the story. Even if we exclude the heroes of might from the story, it seems we have some kind of superhumans, at least as to the story's view on their lifespan and that they relatedness to the government, even not far ago and not territorially far. So it seems something like an illustration of the decrease of human race. So they're still better than those after the flood who built the Babel Tower. Even though they are superhumans in some sense, they have some degree of perfection, yet they do not end up well.
If I may add my comment, this connection of technology and human potential, it's sort of tantalizing, it's inviting to think of, to envision a brighter future as a result of this connection. But again, historically speaking, I don't see many use cases or many instances historically where more empowered, more enhanced, more educated, more powerful people would necessarily become more beautiful and live in a better harmony among themselves and with the world. So the Nietzsche, the kind of equation that Nietzsche is suggesting from the quotes from the last presentation, technology plus human potential equals more beauty and diversity in humanity. I just don't see it historically. So I wonder. I think this is a critical point. Whether we can really claim this safely, whether we can envision a reality where we empower truly, individual human beings or groups of people, and then we will simply hope for the best. Now that you are more powerful, more independent, more autonomous, more capable of achieving your goals, we will simply hope that your goals are somehow aligned, harmonized with a sort of a general understanding of what is good and beautiful in the world, that we will somehow magically all fall into place and live in a harmonious society. I see this as a big gamble, honestly.
I just want quick, Imago, very quick. You have a God or you have certainty which you on the left side you have a God. And on the right side you have the certainty, your human certainty.
Human certainty.
And you choose.
The only human certainty is that we will die.
And trust in God, or you can choose certainty and never acquire this inspiring or giving.
I'm not quite sure. You have systems of governments that do not rely on any notion of God. You have secular systems of government, and you don't need to rely on the notion of transcendent being or harmony or order. You have other versions. So I'm not sure. I follow. Yeah. Okay. I agree to disagree.
But historically speaking, the human rights derive from the notion of God. The human dignity derives from the notion of God, and God is the giver of the human rights.
Yes, in the Western civilization.
Yeah.
Maybe not in
all
all civilizations.
the other civilizations don't have human rights.
If I would defend this case against your claim now,
okay.
I just came to my mind, I would again draw your attention to Gandhi, who said this concept of non-violence needs empowered people, because his understanding of non-violence is a weapon of the strong. So as long as human beings are deprived of means and are really weak, they cannot do what he demanded. So in that sense, I think a certain kind of empowerment is necessary, because if you are deprived of the most essential things, then you are completely lost, and then you are dependent on power mechanisms and so on. But the other, where I still have a problem, I mean, I I even see in Christianity a certain strengthening of anarchism. So it's not by accident that throughout history, again and again, Christian groups came up who developed anarchic concepts. But I still think that means self-rule. So also, again, Gandhi, because I know most about him in this regard, he said, if all the people are able, empowered people of course, to rule themselves, then we don't need a state. And what I would see critically is if self-determination, I do what I want without any kind of, you also really use the term self-restriction, so transhumanism of overcoming self-restriction. So if some kind of self-rule is not included, I think it's an illusion and a very dangerous one that would go a little bit like the song of John Lennon, Imagine, nothing to kill or die for, everything is possible. I think you overlook the necessity to sacrifice sometimes, to limit yourself, to withdraw yourself. I would also point to Václav Havel and Patočka, who understood that very well. So we can go in, we should go probably to have less governments, but it would demand a lot of self-rule on our side. Mm. But maybe you think in the same way, or you don't, and then I would disagree.
Yeah. It seems to me that there is a precondition of a changed heart. In the Christian understanding of partial anarchism, or less government, less totalitarian control, obviously. But if you cannot describe, how does this change of heart happen? In Christianity, we say, well, it's the power of the Holy Spirit, who through the gospel, as it is lived and shared and proclaimed in the community, touches the human being, and he sort of receives his new existence, his new outlook on his life. So it's a change of heart, and then I don't need an outside ruler to tell me what to do, because somehow I naturally want to do good. Okay, that's the Christian narrative, and I understand in this context how it might work. Okay, so how does it work with the concept of this kind of anarchism, where I don't see how the change of heart happens? How do you harmonize self-centered wills of, often confused, often manipulated individuals or groups of people who compete for the same resources globally? How do you harmonize them? Please.
In the Bible, I think the change of heart often happens when there are overwhelmed with people by the power of God. And the change of heart for example, if I can invite an analogy with the invention of atomic bomb, happens when the atomic bomb was invented and it will destroy all the humanity. So, by this immense power, which was held by humanity, they developed a new international law system which would ensure the safety, global safety. So it is this recognition that technology comes to point where they only by themselves will change humans' rights.
Or we can simply drug people and give them a pill, drug them like a soma, in the brave new world, and then everybody will get it. Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we must go eat lunch now. We can come 2 more questions after lunch, okay? But now we have to depart. Lunch is ordered for 1:15, so we'll already be a few minutes late. We are going to have lunch in the same hotel where we stay. So we will now walk 10 minutes, have lunch. Really, I think it would be good if you check out and take it. Oh, you have checked out. Okay.
Will the road be locked here? Could we?
We can leave our things here. Yeah, we will walk through. Yeah. So we will now go together back to the hotel to eat lunch. Thank you all for this fascinating discussion. Thank you.
I'm sorry, just remark, you can leave or you want to leave here because I have keys and I will knock it, so